recording.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to do like ASMR with the claws? And the...
Freddy. Freddy.
That's the song from the movie.
No, I'm just kidding. This is my OC Fanny. What did I say?
I think you said Fanny. I said Francine.
Francine is a good Freddy Krueger female OC. Gender bend.
Yeah, what is that rule? Not rule 34. That's the other one.
Rule 34 is real.
Anyway, welcome to Movies After Midnight. We are back in the saddle. This is like the fanciest setup we've probably had since Movies After Midnight has been its own
That's because I finally cleaned up a little bit.
And also, we have a guest from the olden days of Movies After Midnight.
Hello, I'm Erynn. It's so wonderful to be back.
Yeah.
So great to be here.
How's life been?
Oh, I'm just in the city of angels, thriving.
Oh my god, you live in LA?
I live in LA now. I live in Los Angeles, California. And it's a good time.
Yeah.
I'm having a great time.
Same. We are talking today about I don't know. that seems as good as a moment to switch gears as any.
I was laughing because I was like thinking about how I could make a Dracula's dirty daughter joke, but I just figured we should probably not make one of those.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of did just now.
Just
by
now
saying
I did.
That.
Yeah, I outed the film.
So we are talking about the film Dracula's Daughter, which is a Universal. I should have checked the dates on this. I want to say it was like
I can check the
42, 43. It was sort of the second run of the Universal horror cycle, because they had kind of this pattern where they would release
36.
I was 10 years off.
Don't worry. I'm not judging you. Just kidding.
But yeah, they released Dracula was kind of the genesis of the Universal horror film franchise, I guess, back in the day. And then they followed that up with Frankenstein, and then the Wolfman, and they did The Mummy, which I talked about a few podcasts back, and how The Mummy, on a formulaic level, is basically just Dracula.
And then thankfully they rebooted the franchise with 2015.
Oh, I
16?
don't know. We skipped a couple of reboots
with the
there.
Tom Cruise Mummy.
And then after that was when we got films like Bride of Frankenstein, and Dracula's Daughter was kind of supposed to be the Bride of Frankenstein of the Dracula series, but for whatever reason, it's an official major Universal film, but for some reason I just never hear about it.
Well, and you can tell they spent money on it.
It's not it wasn't a throwaway film. They
honestly, if I'm being honest, it looks better than Bride of Frankenstein a little bit.
Yeah, which is partly why I asked Erynn to join me, because she's kind of the old of Hollywood is kind of her wheelhouse. So
that is so kind of you.
Yeah. And then I'm talking about it because of all the gay subtext, and that's my wheelhouse.
Can I tell you the funny thing?
I should not have hit the table that hard.
Whoa. Calm down. I remember that's something I picked up, and I didn't even know it was supposed to be a subtextual gay movie. But I gotta say, it's not very subtextual for the time. I feel like it's very overt.
I mean,
literally in that first scene, she's like, "Thank God I can finally live with a woman."
Yeah. Well, I think she said live as a woman, not with
a woman. I thought she said live with a woman. I was like, oh.
Turns out that feels like a film in and of itself. Dracula is just really homophobic, so he won't let his kid Hotel Transylvania 4.
Oh my god. I was reading up on it, right? And the really interesting thing is that they couldn't actually use any copyrighted Dracula material. And so that's why you don't see Dracula at all. It was kind of like that, that James Bond film that Never Say Die or whatever the fuck.
Never Again.
Yeah. Never Say Never Again. Is that it?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Well, it's because Connery was like, well, I'm never going to play Bond again. And his wife was like, well, never say never again. And then so 30 years later when he was making a
She
Bond
gave him an
movie
Uno
again.
reverse card, and he was like, damn it. But like it was like that, where like they were able to make that, but through some weird rights technicality.
Yeah.
And so like, yeah, Dracula,
Actually,
they didn't actually have the rights to his character or anything, so you don't ever see him, and there's like all new characters.
That actually explains, because the one returning character is Edward Van Sloan playing the same Professor Abraham Van Helsing, who is the same inspiration as Gabriel Van Helsing from the 2004 movie, but not really the same character. Anyway, Edward Van Sloan comes back and he's playing the same character, but they start calling him Von Helsing now, and I think that's because of the rights issue. That just clicked for me.
Von Helsing.
Because you know Van and Von, like, it's the same
so
thing,
fucking
right?
different. That is so funny.
But yeah, also like I was struck by like we were watching this and you were like, wow, I'm not used to you showing me good movies for this podcast.
I didn't mean to be so. You know what? I keep it real. No, it's not that like, and not in like a. And not in like a quality way, just the restoration of it looks so good compared to like any old.
Also, like it is like
it's a really good
like,
restoration. Yeah,
but also I mean, again, like I said, it is like a lot of times I'll be like, yeah, this movie has this, and this issue, but like you should still watch it because of these things. Whereas this one, I'm like, this is just straight up a good movie, and like it's weird that I don't hear about it, but like
literally like nobody talks about it, and it's like in its time it was super successful, so I wonder why everyone just like, maybe it's because it lacks that like Dracula iconography or whatever.
I think so, yeah, because people have compared it to Bride of Frankenstein and talked about how it did kind of come out the lesser of the two, and I think it's because it doesn't have that, maybe because it doesn't have as much like connective fiber.
Yeah, maybe. That might be it. Because it's almost like an unofficial sequel. It's almost like the when you watch Halloween 1 and 2, and then you watch 3, and it has not a goddamn thing to do with anything. It's kind of like that a little bit.
Halloween 3 is coming up a lot lately.
That's because it's an amazing film.
Yeah, there we go.
But why Halloween 3? No.
So yeah, to get into talking about the actual movie. Yeah, it picks up literally like the moment after the original film ends, and I guess I actually
in a very Halloween 2 way, honestly. I mean, now that
I'm thinking about it, I want to say Jonathan and Mina were like there at the end of Dracula, so I guess they just like got the heck out of Dodge, and Van Helsing was like, yeah, I'll clean up, don't you worry,
do you
kids.
Do you like need me? Because if I get past traffic, that would be like straight up. And then the set is like kind of the same, but like a little different, you know.
I mean, but it basically picks up with him and the police arrive, and they're like, there's all these dead people around, what did you do?
And I love him because he's just like, I did you a service. I can't explain it, but you're lucky I killed all these people.
Yeah, he's like, I killed these vampires for you. You can thank me later. And they're like,
what the fuck is a vampire?
We're actually going to arrest you now, sir. And he's like, sure, I guess.
My favorite line in the whole movie is at the beginning when they're like, if only we knew what these 2 pricks in his neck were.
Yeah, well, they keep saying these 2 marks above the jugular vein. Like, very specifically.
We don't know what vampires are.
Yeah. Also, like, the fact that they have to point out the jugular vein, I don't know what, like...
Because that's where the blood comes out.
I mean, that does actually remind me, because I was watching some of the Frankenstein sequels, like Son of Frankenstein and stuff, and they did start, like... Son of Frankenstein had this whole thing about, like... Well, actually, Victor only thought it was lightning, and actually it was these cosmic rays that science of his time didn't understand that gave the monster life. And so, that, like... They did, like, kind of start... As we start getting into the more, like, sci-fi era of the 40s and 50s, I feel like they started slowly edging into, like, trying to kind of back-build, like, sci-fi reasons for things in these movies. So
that makes a lot of sense.
Which, actually, like, there's a lot of, like, hypnosis and psychology in this one, too, and we'll get to that.
Yeah, but, very fascinating.
Yeah, but we spent some time with Van Helsing, Von Helsing.
Von Helsing.
And then we cut to, well, not really cut to, we are introduced to the titular daughter of Dracula, Maria Zaleska.
Goddamn, what a fierce bitch.
Yeah, she comes in this, like, I don't know, like, full body, like shawl, and then
look.
she, like, is, like, for the runway, like, every moment of this movie. And she steals Dracula's body so that she can, like, make sure it's burned for good. And I was talking about, there's this really great shot of how she, like, fashions a cross out of these, like, sticks and, like, holds it up to kind of, like, invoke, like, you know, like, I condemn you to the fires of perdition or whatever, I don't know. But she's, like, holding the cross, but because she's a vampire, she has to go like this. And, like, it's silly when I do it, but like, from a thematic perspective, that's, like, I think right away it sets up this really fascinating angle of her character where she's, like, she's not, like, the pure evil character that Dracula was, where she's got this, like, reluctance, where she's, like, trying to, like, hold on to things that kind of, like, repel her, sort of.
Well, there's also this very fascinating, like, almost sins of the parents vested in the children, like, Ibsen kind of thing going with, like, the dad and her, because, I don't know, they're all talking about, like, her psychic connection with him and him, like, affecting her from the grave. So there's almost this, like, ambiguity of if she's even, like, in control of her actions the entire time and how reliable she is as, like, a source and a narrator.
Also, like, I'll get into it later, because, like, there's a lot of different things you could take away from this movie, but they do get kind of messy when you start realizing they're all in the same movie, and if that's, like, one thing I would point out, like, that's probably it. But again, like, I'm trying to, like, keep things in order. But yeah, she does that, and we're also introduced to her, like, I don't know, boy toy sidekick.
I'm obsessed with him.
Sandra, I think his name.
Oh my god.
Just this really big, really goth man.
Super goth, dude. Oh my god.
With, like, I don't know.
Whew.
It's, like, not quite a Mo Howard haircut. Like, I didn't expect him to be the one that yeah.
You thought it would be the British detective?
I mean, I don't really know who I thought it would be, but, like...
That's fair. Also, okay, wait. I have to talk about, because I just remembered it, that sequence, right? So, they're going to Transylvania, and it was very fascinating how they did the transition to it, because they just, like, showed a plane exterior, and then they were in Transylvania.
Yeah, they're like, we established there's a plane, boom.
There's a plane, and we're here.
It's like... Well, it's like that, you know, those Indiana Jones shots where they have, like, a map and, like, the dots, but it's, like, the quickest version of that you can get away with.
It's almost like the same kind of angles as, like, a CGI model of an airplane.
I mean, it could have been a miniature, honestly.
Yeah, but I loved that transition into Transylvania. I just had to point it out.
But yeah, and then we're also, the kind of third plot thread is Van Helsing. They're asking Van Helsing, like, I'm going to call him Van Helsing because that's his name.
Von Helsing?
They're asking him, like, well, you're going to need someone to, like, defend you in court and, like tell everyone that you're sane. Do you know anyone? And he's like, yeah, there's this psychiatrist that studied under me. And this psychiatrist comes in and he's, like, the young white guy that every, like, Universal horror movie needs to have. And him and his... She's like his secretary, but they have this, like...
She's his secretary and they're definitely, like, getting down and dirty behind the scenes.
But they have this line where he says something about, like, if you weren't a baroness's daughter, you wouldn't be so something or other, and they just throw that in there.
And there's that moment when, like, she calls him and it's just like, hey, I'm calling you about something. And then he's like, oh, what is it? And she's like, just kidding, it's me. And so it's like the weirdest relationship I've ever seen in like an old Hollywood film.
Well, I feel like the thing is their relationship works, but they feel like every time they're together, it feels like a dynamic from a completely different movie.
Yeah, it's just like that's the only thing that didn't really work for me. Like, he literally hates her the whole time. And then at the end, like, she like gets got by Dracula's daughter and they go to Transylvania. And then he was like, no, you're my love. And I was like, what the hell?
Yeah, I was salty about that.
Well, I think it's just because they can't be gay.
I mean, yeah.
Because there was a lot of subtext between... It was a very, like, showgirls kind of relationship between the secretary lady and Dracula's daughter.
Mm. Yeah, I can kind of...
It seemed like one of hatred.
Mm. Yeah, because actually, we can kind of get into that. So we follow those two around for a while, and then him and Countess Zaleska meet up because she's like still hanging out in London, and they meet up on the set of My Man Godfrey.
Literally,
there's like the window that the guy gets thrown out of. There's like
the room is literally the exact same layout as My Man Godfrey, and I'm not even fucking around.
Like, it's actually
it literally looks like the exact same set. And that could have happened. The dates line up.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that it's not the same set.
Right? Yeah, deadass.
But they, like, meet up, and he's talking about, like... Oh, yeah, there's lots of compulsions that could be cured with psychology, and since she's, like, kind of looking to shrug off this vampire thing, she's like, oh, things could be cured. Huh. Also, Gloria Holden is the actress that plays Countess Zaleska, and she leers so well, like, just super snatched brows, doing the, like, I don't know, like, the goth stare.
You know who she reminds me of? She reminds me, like, she could have played the woman in Sunset Boulevard.
I don't know if I've seen Sunset Boulevard.
It's like the one where she's like, I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille.
Oh,
she's like that like crazy silent film actress. It was very similar in tone to that. It was it was like the one step before you get to that Sunset Boulevard performance, for sure.
Yeah. Which, like, I feel kind of slowly, like, I mean, Dracula already did it with, like, Bela Lugosi, but, like, I feel like she definitely steps into that thing of, like, I think once you become a vampire, you just become super extra and melodramatic. It's just part of the territory.
Honestly, true.
Because, like, again, them outfits.
Yeah, and there was this really interesting subtext, too, with, like, I thought it was really interesting that they, like, kidnapped this girl in the, like, second act, right?
Yeah.
Because she needs to, like, drink blood or whatever, because she's a fucking vampire.
Yeah.
And this girl, like, they're like, do you want to come model and take pictures? And she's like, yeah, sure. And then they're, like, getting her drunk so that they can take nudie pictures, and I was like...
Yeah, well, they kind of like unicorn coupled her too, or
you could tell this is like the cusp of like the production code, like becoming a thing, because it's like one step in, one step out, you know.
But that's that was my joke. I was like, they kind of unicorn coupled her, where he's like, hey, me and my wife are looking for a third to join us in the bed.
Straight up though.
But yeah, that scene is really important because like. With Dracula, with the original novel, like, vampiring, like, the whole, like, blood-sucking was very, like, analogous to sex and sexuality, and, like, a lot of writers, like, Bram Stoker really kicked it off, but, like, a lot of writers wrote about vampires as a way to kind of, like, talk about sexuality without talking about sexuality, because it's like, no, we're just writing about a guy drinking someone's blood, that's not sex.
That's not sex at all.
Like, vampirism and sexuality have had this. By the time this film was made, they've had like this correlation, and so like you always see Dracula pursuing these younger women. So to have her like targeting is like, you know, it's still kind of creepy, the context, but like to have her targeting this younger woman as a woman, like very firmly establishes.
I think that's gonna be a word.
Honestly, it sounds like a word. Very firmly establishes this like lesbian, bisexual kind of subtext. Because like, I say bisexual because she does like have this guy around that like it's sort of implicit that they've been a thing.
Is it really implicit? Because I got the vibes that they were like you know, each other's like.
Like the beard couple.
Yeah, yeah, that's the word. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, that's kind of the vibe I got.
I can kind of see that.
I mean, as much as I would like him to take me out on a night of the town.
I mean, I do. The one thing that made me think there was at least something at some point was near the end when she's like, because she talks to the psychiatrist and she's like convinced that he can like help her be not a vampire, and he eventually is like, "You're killing people. I don't want anything to do with you." And she's like, her reaction is funny because it's like, "Oh, now that I've killed people, you're just gonna be a dick about it." Okay.
I thought we were fucking friends.
But she decide, like, she kidnaps his girlfriend because she's like, "I have her, and like you're gonna need to come to me." And she's like, tells Sanders, she's like, "I want to make him a vampire," and he's like,
"Wait, isn't this the secretary lady?"
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. Oh my god, the way you were talking about it, I was like, is it a different character?
No, yeah.
Oh my god. Okay.
But she tells Sander, her like partner, she's like, "I'm gonna make him a vampire," and he's like, "Hey, you promised to make me a vampire. Have you forgotten about that?" And so that was like what kind of gave me the impression that maybe at some point they were a thing and like the fires had just kind of gone cold over time.
That makes sense. I also think the detective character is very interesting. Because he doesn't do a goddamn thing the whole time.
Yeah,
he just kind of goes around following the wrong leads.
Yeah,
and I love the kind of like video game setup of it, where like he's out doing all these kooky adventures, and then he has some people back at the home base who are like, "Call him and tell him that's not good."
Yeah.
Or like, I really really loved that element of it.
There's a interactive DVD game called Dracula Unleashed, and like you're absolutely like a lot of his scenes where he's investigating to have exactly the energy of that game. Now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, like if you've seen Knives Out, you could kind of understand that kind of dynamic where like there's a lot of like inside information in which, like, I guess dramatic irony more so, where we're watching him be completely incorrect and we're kind of sticking around the whole time to see if he's gonna figure it out or not.
Yeah, because he's like, "Oh, puncture wounds on the jugular vein. I wonder what caused that."
I couldn't get over it. And like, I wonder what these 2 red marks are. They must mean, I don't know what they mean. They must mean something.
Yeah. But actually, with the hypnosis subtext and with her kidnapping him or trying to kidnap him, that actually was what really made me think that like. Because I wasn't sure like what the like if the gay subtext was like kind of a reception theory thing, but like that whole bit to me really felt like something that only someone like I feel like in the community would have had like come up with, because there's this very like, if you're like part of the like alphabet community and you've come from like a very like closeted background, I feel like it's not uncommon to have this idea of like, I wish I could be cured, or I wish I could like have this taken away from me. And like eventually you kind of learn that like this isn't something that's going to go away, and you have like you learn to like, you know, take it as part of yourself. And I think that's very much her arc, where she's got this thing and she's like, I can be cured. And especially by putting all her hopes on this man, it's like with the lesbian subtext, it's almost like a lot of those people that are like, you know, if I marry a guy or if I marry a woman and I get in this like cis-het relationship, then that'll fix me and I won't like want these things anymore. And so like her putting all this on him, and like they kind of like defang that near the end, because she's like, "Oh, now I see I can never be cured. I just want to be vampires with him." But like the actions say otherwise. But like I feel like that's kind of the tragedy of her character arc, is that she never really comes to terms with who she is, and that's why she ends up like kind of failing, because she keeps like pushing for this guy to fix her when really it's like she has to like deal with herself.
Yeah, and even when you trace it back to like the
and for a movie in 36, that is like
really big. Yeah. But even if you trace back the like influences of the film, since they couldn't, I don't remember this, like I don't remember exactly where the influence came in, if it was the scriptwriter or who brought it up, but there's like murmurings that the script is loosely based off of this novel called Camille, because they couldn't get all of Bram Stoker's stuff, or for Dracula exactly, so they had to pull some of the subtext from another kind of source material, and that source material deals with a Victorian lesbian relationship, I think.
I have Actually, I'm gonna be right back.
We're gonna take a little break.
I've had this for ages.
Oh my god.
Okay, we're back.
Sick.
So, in the vampire book, let me just pull up. Honestly, I don't know if this book is like pretty darn exhaustive, like in terms of vampire media, and I don't know if it mentions Dracula's daughter.
That is whack to me.
But let me just pull up the Carmilla. Carmilla is the title character in the vampire novelette by British writer Sheridan Le Fanu. What else did she do? Originally published a short story in a collection titled In a Glass Darkly in 1872. Stereo or... I mean, yeah, now I'm just reading out of a book, but...
Very informational, though.
I want to say Carmilla was... it predated Dracula, and a lot of people think it's where...
where Bram Stoker got his idea.
Yeah, so it makes sense that they would, like...
yeah, I think that's what it was. Because they couldn't pull from Bram Stoker, they went ahead and pulled from what he pulled from. That's what it was. That's what it was. Yeah. Which I think is very, very interesting for them to pull that and leave that subtext in it. For 1936, that is very true.
Yeah.
Because actually, pre-code films, you have a lot of films that like really explore lesbian subtexts in particular.
Yeah, like... Which is, like, yeah.
Like, there are a lot of pre-code films. I think that's what I just said.
Yeah, like, it's from a historical perspective, that's always interesting to think about, because I feel like in terms of like acceptance of a lot of things, we were like a lot farther along than people think, and then like there's something about like coming home from World War II kind of like set us back in terms of like a lot of things. And
then like once Joseph Breen got in there and was kind of in charge of like all of these images from all the studios, and once there was that system in place where system of censorship in place, it was really hard to get that kind of subtext across in the same way.
Yeah.
And, like, sometimes you see it, like, for sure, but for the most part, it's just not there.
Yeah. Although we did, this is, like, a whole tangent now, but I always talk about, like, Christine Jorgensen was one of the, I think she was the first, either the first trans woman or maybe just the first American trans woman to have, like, to like medically transition.
I thought you meant in general, and I was like, how?
We'd never really had the idea.
I was like, my brain was like...
She invented transsexualism in 1950 some, but like she like the way she was treated in like media and stuff, like people would refer to her as she and like as a woman, and like that like they were a little weird about the transition, but it was more from a perspective of like, oh, that's interesting, than like the kind of like fired up hostility you get these days.
Yeah. And
again, like I think it ties back to like just like there's a lot of like I don't know, not to sound super like I don't know, stereotypical or whatever, but like these things were like, not only did they exist, but I feel like they were a lot more accepted than we sometimes think they were looking back.
Yeah, I think it's a complete misnomer that like the past was always somehow more socially behind than we are. Yeah.
And like I think this movie stands as a good monument to that.
Yeah, a really, really good example of that. Because also, like, I mean, women are also, like, even talking about it from, like, a pseudo-feminist angle, like, all the women in the film are never, like, questioned for their power. They just kind of, like, exist as empowered women.
Yeah.
You know, even from the secretary, like, yeah, the secretary is a secretary, but, like, she's balanced out with, like, these other women who are, like, there's this huge conversation sequence where it's all women discussing things, and the men are just listening, and it's very, very fascinating in that way.
And also, like, with the secretary character, they very, like, very firmly establish that, like, she doesn't need this job, she just kind of, like, she probably kind of just sticks around because she likes the guy.
Yeah.
And so, like, that even in that angle, like, what would normally be, like, a power dynamic kind of shifts.
Yeah, because she didn't give a fuck.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
I think, yeah, because you're right. He, like, threatens to fire, and she's like,
well, one time she quits, and he's like, yeah, but you're coming with me, though. Like, that's a whole thing. But, like, again, it's still, like, at the end of the day, it's still her coming with him, not... Yeah.
Yeah. No, 1,000%. 1,000%. But, yeah, a very good movie. Very good film.
Yeah, yeah. And I never hear about it, and that upsets me.
Yeah, it's very odd
Also,
to me,
like,
too, because I feel like Universal Monsters are such a huge thing.
Yeah.
Like, there's such a huge niche community that, like, you just, like, I don't know why. Like, literally, Universal this year, it had, like, a Bride of Frankenstein, like, haunted house, you know? Where's the Dracula's daughter haunted house?
Yeah, well, it's funny, because, like, you know, the Bride of Frankenstein has become this very, like, iconic character. But, like, the concept of, like... the daughter of Dracula has never been... I feel like it's never been revisited in anything.
Yeah, and I wonder if maybe it's because Bride of Frankenstein at least had Frankenstein in it. And I wonder if maybe some of the disconnect is that, like, Dracula's daughter has no Dracula.
You know what Bride of Frankenstein also had? A bunch of, like, special effects people in little jars or whatever. And nobody talks about that.
Nobody says anything.
People just kind of forget that happened.
Oh my god.
But yeah, like, because even, like, I feel like The Mummy was kind of like a deep cut for a while until, like, the 1999 remake, like, brought it back into...
Straight up. Because, like, the big three I hear about all the time, at least, are, like, Dracula, Frankenstein, and Invisible Man. But I might be biased towards Invisible Man.
Yeah. I still need to...
I like Claude Rains a lot.
Yeah, we need to talk about...
the hypnosis?
Oh, that too. At some point, we need to talk about some of this, because pretty much every Universal monster movie has, like, so many sequels.
That is so fucking true.
There's a sequel to The Invisible Man about, like, his grandson fighting in using the Invisible Man serum to fight Nazis, and, like, Peter Lorre is in it as the villain, and, like... I feel like I need to talk about that at some point.
I feel like I need to take a Ouija board to Hollywood Forever to ask Peter Lorre about that. Be like, how'd you feel about that?
Yeah. Apparently his character in that movie was the inspiration for the like, Nazi with the glasses in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Huh. Wow.
Yeah. I'm just cribbing, like, whole things from, like, a Cinemassacre episode, but yeah, interesting stuff.
Interesting.
But yeah, with Dracula's daughter, it reminds me of a lot of, like, early Hitchcock, because, like, the male lead is this, like, mental, like, psychotherapist. And because psychotherapy,
yeah,
like,
very much
it's
that
a lot
era.
Like Spellbound, where,
like,
the idea is, like, hypnosis is just part of, like, this. It's sort of like that magic science kind of thing, where, like...
Yeah, and it's also like Spellbound in that they have, like, a Freud character.
Oh, yeah. Which is weird, because they're, like, repurposing Abraham Van Helsing, who was already,
Van
like...
Helsing?
I'm just gonna keep doing that joke. But yeah, like, it reminds me of Spellbound in that they're like, yeah, this is all actual science that we're pulling from, and then, like, years later we're like, that was maybe not as scientific as you thought. But
well, it's an even interesting interpretation of that, because, like, they're all wrong.
I mean, yeah.
You know? That's a very fascinating thing about it.
Because she's like, how could someone be cured of, like, a compulsion? Because she's, like, stopping just short of being like, hey, I'm a vampire.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, if there's an alcoholic, you know what we do? We lock him in a room with all the alcohol we can.
Also, like,
I don't think there was any point in time where that was considered, like, a good idea.
I think that scene, and then the other scene that really screams it is when, like, he goes to visit her for the first time. And he's like, you're the first lady with no mirrors around her house. And she goes, yeah. Vampires can't see themselves in mirrors. And he's like, that's weird that you said that.
Yeah, there is one point where she's pretty much all but spelling it out for him. And
she's like,
oh, weird lady.
I am a vampire. And he's like, vampires aren't real.
He's like, I'm sure mad at my secretary for prank calling me.
Yeah.
I did like her prank call joke where she's like, oh, we're having elephants that are seeing pink men. And that's, like, such a 30s joke.
What does that mean? I didn't get it.
It's like, I don't know, that was, like, always a Looney Tunes gag, is like people would fall asleep and see pink elephants in their dreams. Like,
Oh!
It's something I kept seeing in Looney Tunes, so, like...
I feel like Dumbo has that in it, too.
You know, I think it does.
Yeah, okay, got it. Got it.
But it was, like, a very timely joke. Like, I don't know. It just...
Yeah, I agree.
But, yeah. And also, like, I feel like they were doing that thing, like I said, with... Young Frankenstein with Son of Frankenstein, where you have, like, because Dracula was, like, hypnosis was like a Dracula thing, going back to the novel and especially emphasized in the movie, and so, like, they're picking up that theme and just making it more, like, science-y, kind of. But yeah, which I think is I think ultimately, if there's one thing that worked against this movie, it's probably the fact that they had so much going on that it kind of, like, maybe interfered with itself sometimes.
Yeah, it's kind of trying to set up a lot of, like, okay, so it's trying to, like, really world build vampires. And it's, like, I think a little bit too much for the premise.
Yeah,
like, sometimes films get carried away with the world, and they forget that, like, nothing really, like, you don't really have to spell it out that much, you know?
Yeah.
It's more about the individual story.
That's an interesting thing to discuss with 40s movies as a whole, like, or with, like, Universal movies especially, because it's, like, such a really broad franchise, is that they change their rules a lot, like, from movie to movie. Well,
and the films are really short compared to films nowadays, so it's even harder to pack so much into it.
Like, an interesting part of, like, the rule changing is part of that was just because it was an era where, like, you couldn't go rent a VHS of the first movie if you wanted to, like, double check how that went, so, like, from kind of both the audience and the production angle, like, having to keep these consistent rules from movie to movie wasn't what they were focused on. So they were, like, kind of building things like...
They did cast Dracula's daughter. She looks like Bela Lugosi's child.
She does have, like, the same, like, vibe,
yeah. Yeah. But you're totally right. They definitely rely on that level of ambiguity for sure, sure.
Well, I think, and I think that's interesting to talk about just because, like, it just reflects the era we live in where, like... Now we think of, like, you know, having consistency and having these callbacks and, like, everything. Like, sometimes there are people who, like, place more importance on that than what actually happened in the movie itself. And, like, it's interesting to look back at a time where they were like, got very scared for you for a second. But, like, looking back at a time where they were like, oh yeah, this is just a movie, we're gonna make a movie and it'll operate on movie rules.
Well,
which is maybe a little flippant, but, like, you know,
yeah. No, that's a really good point. And the idea that, like, nowadays every single thing has to be a franchise with, like, 10 different layers and this and this and, like, backstories for every single character and this and this. It has to be fully fleshed out for it to, like, be relevant and something that people worked hard on.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, these films, they were more like, we're just gonna make what we're feeling. Or, like, it's okay if we kind of, like, break from our rules. There's a lot more freedom, I think, which is, like, I don't think it's, like, a negative thing. I think it's, like a more freeing thing for sure. And I think it's a testament of the times changing in both of those ways, too.
Yeah, definitely.
It definitely makes you look at our era of films and see, like, Dune is a huge prime example where, like, Dune, it almost feels like...
They're finally doing it.
But it feels like it's setting up a world as opposed to being an individual film.
Yeah.
It's meant to. It's not an individual film. It's a film for a franchise.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, like, with Universal Monsters being kind of maybe one of the first really big film franchises. It's interesting, especially because they built a franchise, but each of the movies very much is kind of like their own thing with maybe a callback or two.
Yeah, and it's I think why Universal, like, stands the test of time in a very interesting way, because it's like almost like a Sherlock Holmes or like There's one other example I was going to use that I lost, but all the stories are individual, so you don't need everything else. It's a very accessible franchise.
Ironically, modern Universal would completely ignore when they're like, here's a Tom Cruise mummy movie, and also, like, Dr. Jekyll's there for some reason, and, like, I don't know, Dark Universe.
Woo! Woo-wee!
It's just really funny that probably the best and worst examples of cinematic universes are both Universal.
It's true, because, like, I mean, I don't think... some things just aren't meant for... Some things are better off individual.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the Universal monsters, they're more like scenario characters as opposed to, like, characters you follow for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
Like, what, are you going to follow Frankenstein on his day-to-day? No, you're going to, like, watch Frankenstein in these very specific scenarios.
You do get kind of
some Frankenstein is almost that. Smoke good.
Well, that was, this is another tangent, but they, with the Hammer movies, it was interesting because their take on Frankenstein was like, the monster is pretty much done by the first movie. And they just followed Dr. Frankenstein doing increasingly screwed up things over the course of his life. And that was something I was going to touch on, because usually, like, Hammer redid pretty much every Universal monster, and again, this is one that they, like, never touched.
And I wonder, too, like, some of the other Universal monster films, they're not necessarily about the monster first. They're about other stories that are around the monster, and this film is definitely very, like, it's about Dracula's daughter. Yeah,
she's probably the only, like, I mean, Frankenstein was kind of, the monster was kind of sympathetic. The Wolfman, usually Larry Talbot is, like, the protagonist if there's, like, because they did start doing crossover movies later. There was, like, Castle of Dracula, where they have, like, the Wolfman and Frankenstein and Dracula, and, like...
And they were like, it's our house now.
But, yeah. Yeah, what were we even talking about? I got so distracted thinking about Monster Squad now.
I think we were just talking about how Dracula's daughter was litty fam.
Yeah,
it was
she's
bussin'.
100% like style goals.
Slay queen.
Absolutely. But yeah, if you want to watch this movie yourself, or pretty much all the like classic Universal movies are free to watch on Peacock.
Yeah, and the Peacock restoration looks so fucking good.
It is so good. It's so crispy.
So crispy.
So yeah, you can check it out for yourself. I would say it's a good time.
Not sponsored.
Especially on this All Hallows of Eves.
That's All Hallows of the Eves.
Of the Eves E override.
Don't go to sleep. I'll be there.
But yeah,
1, 2.
So yeah, watch Kylie. Dracula's Daughter. Is there anything you wanna promote? Any place they can?
I just had a makeup line come out with Kylie Jenner. I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. That is a fucking joke. Because I'm Francine. Or I'm Franny, or whatever the fuck. I'm Fran Fine. I don't have anything to promote. No, you can follow me at Erynn. ERYNN 3 times on Instagram. I am a filmmaker and actress and model in Los Angeles, California.
Yeah, do that.
Yeah.
And you can
fucking better.
And you can find me right here. Wherever, because like, if you found this podcast, this is it. So like,
you find me right here.
If you're looking for me, you've already done it.
My coordinates are. You found me.
Yeah. So yeah. So
hell yeah! Thank you for having me, Evelyn. This was a very good time.
Thanks for coming on. Like, yeah. It was a good time.
We live in our glory days.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know. I'm hoping to like get back to regular podcasting, so that look forward to that in the future. I got some plans for November. Other than that, yeah, I guess I will see you guys next time.
Hell yeah.